Jace, thank you so much for joining us once again. Our third time around the track, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. It is our third time, and I'm looking forward to it. It's a great experience.
We wanted to talk about solutions today, and I know that a lot of people are, I don't want to say maybe the wrong word is searching for them, but maybe some are grasping for solutions or wanting solutions to be presented to them. And I know that you can talk deep into this for what that means for each and every one of us, because we are all on our individual paths and our individual journeys. And I've noticed over the last year that one of the big questions I keep asking is, what are the solutions for this? And we've had many talks about this, and you always bring it back to home. So I'm going to hand it over to you and let you channel your your wisdom for the listeners and viewers, mate. Over to you, brother.
All right, thanks, Pete. I think we all are searching for something, but it's probably goes back to something that we've all heard about, which seems a little bit mystical to some, is intuition. And intuition has a lot of, I would say, beliefs and expectations around it. And some even say that intuition is something that we learn. But one thing I've come to understand is intuition is just the direction of our attention and our ability to be able to interpret what is not seen into words that we can start to express, embody if we choose. So it's interesting to me that we've come to understand ourselves as very much physical beings, and physical beings supposedly have five senses. I was made aware of a guy, I think by the name of Richard Buck, in the late 1800s, was talking about the seven senses in one of his speeches, and he spoke about them as if they were just normal, natural. It wasn't some new discovery, but he spoke about the seven senses. And it's what I'd come to understand prior to that as the noble senses of imagination and intuition. And for many of us, we wait, we have these awarenesses, we have these thoughts, we have these ideas that come to us, but it's generally directed by and stimulated by pain, what we feel. And to me, this is the opposition of what intuition really is. What we feel is what we've come to interpret through our physical senses. And our physical senses, to me, are the lower levels of our consciousness. It's our ability to be able to use our intuition to be able to seek what we're looking for, to be able to understand that being most important. But that really requires us to be able to navigate what it is that exists within us, because for many of us, we're seeking things that exist outside. And outside of us is everything that is not intuitive. It may lead us to a space that we want to look at internally. And for some of us, that's only directed by great amounts of pain and frustration and often overwhelm. And yes, we can be intuitive in those moments. But the thing is, it's the direction of our attention. When we are looking for reasons why we're in pain, we'll find the reasons why we're in pain, and we'll confirm and we'll justify that to ourselves. But to start to look for a way forward, to start to really create, for me, that's what solutions are all about. And when I say create, it's not about getting some nice colors and putting them on a canvas. Creating is something that has never existed before. And to me, this is the very marriage of fear. And fear itself, there's a lot of, colloquial terms and quotes that people stop at in this, nice feeling of what fear may be. But ultimately, for me, fear is about the unknown. It's the unfamiliar. It's about being able to step into and embrace that. For many of us, we'd like to be able to do that. We'd like to be able to liberate ourselves from fear. But that requires us to understand the aspects that we have within us, not the ones that we learn, but the ones that are inherent within us. And I would say imagination and intuition are they're the hierarchical highest point of our consciousness and our awareness if we understand how to use it. So for me, solutions, what we're all looking for, it's not so much what we find, it's about understanding the tools that we are gifted with and how to use them towards creating something that is aligned with our own soul. And when I say soul, I don't mean S-O-U-L, I mean S-O-L, as it truly is represented. It's the sun, the light that is within us. And for us to be able to recognize that wisdom and move away from the physical but go into the energetic awareness. I mean, for me, just as a quick sidestep is, for me, physical has feelings. And for many of us, we hear people talk about, well, it didn't feel right, so I didn't do it. You know, I had a feeling in my gut. But these are quite, you know, base level interactions with our own self. It's a feeling that we can interpret depending upon, again, a confusion of how we're feeling at that time, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, or whether we should do it or not do it. Our capacity to tap into our awareness, which is what is existing in the moment, is our ability to be able to navigate that by determining something that we haven't yet experienced. It is stepping into that light that we are able to embrace beyond what we can see. So for me, solutions are not something that we discuss. It's something that we discover when we choose to become in alignment with our own self. And once we choose to do that and have the courage to do that, it's, for me, embracing only what we are aware of, what no one else can see, and then having the courage to be able to express that in such a way that other people can come to understand it. So I think solutions, you know, are great, but solutions can only, in my experience, be manifested or brought to life when we understand them. And when we understand them is when we're taking complete responsibility, embodying them with the capacity to be able to let them go. The problem with solutions all the time is people have them, but they want to hold on to them. The very nature of holding on to something is to recognize that we don't have freedom in that space. We are then reliant upon something else bringing it into our life rather than us creating it.
Give us some examples.
Well, to create for me is we've got it in our physical capacity. I would say our physical body is like a significantly large hard drive. It holds on to all the information and knowledge we have received. When we don't let that go, or when we don't express it, because we hold it in, we have a great and amazing insight and awareness. But the experience for most of us is when we have this inspired moment and we feel good, we feel alive, we invoke this energy within us to start moving forward. But what immediately we become aware of is all the reasons why it won't work, all the problems, all the hurdles that stand in front of it. We become dynamically and immediately aware of the last time we tried to do this, like maybe such things as partnerships. You know, we've all had experiences with them, whether they're, you know, business related or they're intimate or whatever they may be. When we look to go into another partnership, we become immediately aware of the ones that we've been through before that didn't serve us. So it's to understand when we start to move forward, and this comes from a courageous and base level understanding that everything exists to support us. If we have a base level understanding that everything is in opposition to us, that everything there is to challenge us, that everything is there to fight us, that everything is there as conspiring because it has its own intentions to control us, we'll continue to keep believing that things are there to fight against us. So when we have this momentary inspiration of what we're going to bring forward and what we're going to create, it is immediately followed in the supporting progress of bringing forward all the things that we now need to address in order to manifest and bring forward that inspiration. So if we're looking to create something larger than ourselves, and previously we tried to bring people together, and in that prior experience, that hasn't worked out, and people just haven't got it. People don't understand it. We can look at that and use that as the point of reference or as the truth, or we can recognize at that particular point, we just didn't have the understanding. We didn't communicate. We didn't do it to such a point where other people understood what we were saying. Because whilst people don't understand what we're saying, they'll maintain a level of opposition. And opposition is healthy as long as it's moving towards understanding. But whilst we maintain this expectation and this experience of opposition that people just don't get me, they don't understand me, we'll continue to keep presenting things in such a way that will not be understood. So to create, we must realize that we need to then forego or let go of those things that were once valuable to us. So to find a solution in any area of our life, it requires us to let go, because to let go is a confirmation that we recognize that we have access to it all of the time. We hold on to the things that we don't understand. We hold on to the things that we don't know how we created. And this may be in, particular experiences of relationships where I'm never going to go into a relationship with this type of person again. And we start to identify that, and we start to become restricted by those limitations or by those previous experiences. So to create is really, for me, all about letting go. And, we've spoken about this quite a bit before around freedom. And it's interesting to me what's going on, quite consistently, is people are looking for freedom by trying to lobby certain entities or organizations that cannot give them what they require. The common one at the moment is the government or governments around the world perceivably taking away rights of individuals. But without the individual actually recognizing that they consented to that in the first place. And if you're lobbying someone to receive your freedoms back, we see this consistently. It's happening a lot around the world. There's a lot of great people getting together and courageous people getting together to form marches, to form organizations. But ultimately, they're doing it from a point of opposing something else. And this is why I've never seen a freedom movement actually have ultimate success. And the truth of what I mean by ultimate success is that people are still fighting for their freedom. There isn't an example of how people can do that. So when we get a great amount of momentum towards a particular outcome, which requires someone else or some other organization to be liberated, is all that oppositionary organization needs to do is to step back, is to acquiesce in some small part. And ultimately that freedom movement stops because they believe they've achieved what they wanted, but ultimately they still haven't liberated themselves. Ultimately, they're still providing a reliance upon this false power. And I would say in that our freedom is only one thing. It's our relationship with our own power. And when we can't understand that, when we can't navigate that, we then place that responsibility on some determined or created fictional power that exists outside of our own self. So I don't know if that gives you a specific example, but I'm more so talking into, as an individual, we are the only ones that determine our freedom. Our freedom is demonstrated by the way we express ourselves and our ability to let go of what we once knew in order to understand what we now are. So I would say that's, I don't know if that's, as I said, I'm not sure if it's a specific example that someone can take away and go, I get that. But there is, it's all about for me, it's all about the relationship that we have to our own power. And when we are unable to do that, we start blaming others and expecting them to change in order so we can be free.
Well, I'll give you two small examples over the last 24 hours. So I walked into a health food shop yesterday, and within 3 or 4 minutes, I had 3 different women come up to me. They were women because they were shopping, and they were sort of shocked that they saw me in there. And they weren't together; they were individual. And met the first one. She goes, "Oh, keep doing what you're doing. You got a lot of support." Second one, pretty much the same thing. And then the third one, pretty much the same thing. And I thanked them for their kind words. And I said, you know what, I'm actually going to take a step back for a while. And I could see the mechanisms going around into what I just said to them. And it was interesting because I was just observing. And then I came home and I hopped onto Telegram social media for one of the posts because I haven't posted anything controversial for a few days. And the first comment I read was somebody that said, basically, why the fuck weren't you at the march today? You've gone quiet. We need you more than ever now, and you're a fucking sellout. I was like, okay, well, this is interesting. The energy that I just experienced within a matter of an hour, praise, adulation, and support, and then attack, and feeling like that I've let the team down, so to speak. So I sat with that and observed how all of that was, the two polarities, so to speak. And I've had this recently over this year. I'm noticing the polarities that I perceive people to have about myself. And perhaps I have those polarities myself, which is why I'm attracting them. And it was really interesting because I'm like, whoa, this is what we're in at the moment. It feels like this is what we're in. Everybody's sort of not sure of whether to fight, whether to wait for somebody else to do it for them. And yeah, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but I'm just relaying
I
my
was going to
observation.
I think I'd say that that's perfect because it's the extremes of the polarities that, when they're integrated, give us a greater amount of power. So the scope or the space between those polarities that we're able to embody is what allows us to have power. When we have small polarities and we embrace them, we have small power. So when we are allowing ourselves as an individual to see the capacity that we have to experience and then also embrace the distance between those polarities and the speed at which I would say, in my determination, what consciousness is, it's the speed at which we take action. Consciousness to me is not some ethereal experience, but the speed at which we can act on the distance of those polarities allows us to have power to create. Now, for many of us, when we become distracted, when we become restricted, when we become stuck, is when we're accepting a polarity that might be on a positive 10 on one side, but we're only able to accept a negative 3 on the other. And we become stuck because there is not a meeting of those polarities that creates power to move forward. What we have to do is then we have to dissolve that positive 10 down to the 3, and then we start to lose the power that we have, and we accept a lesser adulation to meet the lower level of embracing on the negative side. And I would say what you've got there is, and the challenge that comes at times in accepting both of those extremes of polarity is recognizing our own significance. And like you said, in moments of, I'm feeling to step back. I mean, there's a real courage that exists in our own life to start putting time into ourselves, because when we're unable to direct ourselves authentically in a way that we choose, it's sometimes difficult to stop and say, well, I need to give myself some time. I need to give myself, more so than time, I need to give myself space, because for that, it allows me to correct and see my own truth. And I would suggest for most of us, in what this sort of synthetic type reality that most of us are buying into, and what I mean by that is the one that exists outside of ourselves, is that we are very much attracted to the light, to the positive, to the niceties of life. But very little growth will be found there, because the light is what we've seen, the light is what we've experienced, the light's what we've already done, and it's a continuation of our own knowledge and previous experience. But our ability to step into the darkness and receive it as equally as we would the greatest celebration of our life is what allows us to move forward. And that's just been my experience. And it's not my experience personally within myself, because I have all my own challenges, but it's something that I've seen demonstrated in people that have much greater courage than me, to be able to move through things that they don't want to look at, that they can't see. Those triggers that you're not a good person, or that you're weak, or that you're insecure. This is where most of us get stuck, because of our inability to embrace that side. But where you're getting, like what you said, adulation on one side, and then the same degree of, judgment. Well, I mean, I suppose it's a negative judgment, because there's judgment on either side, but is what allows you to have power within yourself. It then comes down to, from a point of creation, what you choose to do with that. And that's, I think, the biggest thing for all of us is, I have a vision, I have an awareness, and I have an understanding. and I'm now going to step out to create that. But in many times we take those initial steps because we haven't done that before. It might not work out just as we saw it. It might be a little bit more prickly than what we first thought. But it's our ability to keep moving through them, which allows us to eventually find alignment with other people that want to create something of significance. But we first have to embody that within our own self. We have to let go of what we thought may have occurred or what we think may be the best part, and we need to come into the present moment and look at the awareness. And what I mean by that is continuing to ask questions, continuing to stay in the conversation long enough is what determines our courage, is what determines what we can create. But for many of us, we step out of the conversation when it starts to get a little bit difficult, when it starts to get a little bit challenging. But that's the opportunity to navigate that particular darkness. And that's where we find difference. We're not going to find difference in the light. We're going to find comfort and familiarity because that's where we've been. And this is, without stepping down a different pathway, it's a lot of the new age thoughts that we have that there's an awakening that's going on at the moment. I don't buy into or subscribe into that at any particular point in time. I don't believe that at this particular stage of life that we're any more awoken or enlightened than what we were previously. I think it might quite often be the opposite, and that's why people are fighting for their freedom, because they've dug themselves into such a hole to realize what they don't have. We wouldn't be fighting for freedom. People wouldn't be requiring freedom if they didn't already have it. But that comes down to, as you say, stepping back and identifying, well, what is freedom for me? When I become so absent from that and it becomes determined by what other people, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. These types of ideas that some people eventually go, well, I suppose I can live with that. I suppose I can accept that. But, we've got to determine that ourselves. I mean, freedom in a large part is self-determination, not falling into the societal or the collective ways, but to determine our own, whilst we also equally accept that other people have their own.
Yeah, I met a fella this morning that is a mate of mine, and he was actually a brilliant body worker, and he was getting stuck into my psoas muscles or psoas and my subscaps in here. It's a true honor to have somebody dig deep into those parts of your body if you've never had it done before. If you want to surrender to some pain, then get somebody to go deep into those parts. And and he went to the one of the marches yesterday, or the rallies in Sydney, and I said, "How was it, mate?" And he's a very outspoken person. He embodies that fuck it, I'm fighting for this. And I said, "How was the rally yesterday?" And he says, I was a little disappointed by the turnout. There was only a few thousand people there, 4,000, maybe 5,000 people. He goes, I thought we were going to get to the mass, by having enough people there. That was more than that this time, because it sounds like there was less there this time than the one that I spoke at a couple of months ago. And I know we've had a conversation about this and why those things may not be the smartest endeavors to attend. Take us through that. I know you touched on it before, but identify what are the positives or negatives, if you actually use those terminologies, about a march, a rally. Where has it worked in the past, and will it work again in the future, or do we need to create something new moving forward?
Yeah, I think we need to create something new all the time, and that's part of the challenge, because we become attached to what we know rather than creating what's new. Yeah, I'm not a massive fan of rallies. I believe, and I was at one yesterday where some gifted people spoke about some interesting information, but the question is what happens beyond that. And do we elevate a community or a society by providing with information that they haven't yet asked for, that they haven't yet requested in order to action? Because when we take on more information, and it only adds to the other information that we haven't acted upon. And A good friend of yours and someone I've spoken to a bit recently, gave me this saying that a solution provided without elevation ultimately becomes the problem. And
Can you say that
there's many
again? Say that one again. I like that. I like that. I want you to say it again, but I'm also trying to think who would have said it, and I'm thinking it's probably Daniel.
The guy that lives on the Gold Coast. Yeah.
The Waterman.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved it when he said a solution without elevation of awareness ultimately becomes the problem. So if people don't understand how to action great inspirations and ideas, because ultimately they're not actually bringing themselves or qualifying themselves forward by asking a question or being ready and wanting to ask. And I think for many of us, the challenges at the moment, like these people that said to you, come on, you've got to get out there, you've sold out, you're not there for us anymore. It's when people are saying that is it demonstrates within their own self what they've given away or what they've taken on or what they've aspired to that someone else can do for them that they can't do for themselves. But are we providing any service to someone when we see someone in suffering and when we see someone in pain that we give advice that has not been requested? All we're doing ultimately is burdening them with more energy and ultimately information that they can't act on. And are we liberating or freeing them? Are we liberating them or freeing them more by leaving them to sit in their own mud and for them to actually choose, this is the time for me to get out? Because someone who doesn't actually want to hear what you've got to say, no matter how wise or solution-based it may be, is not going to act upon it and eventually becomes a burden, and that solution becomes the problem. And ultimately, it causes them to judge themselves. It forms this big stick that they keep beating themselves with each and every day, and they sit in, moments of affirmation that I'm a great person, but they still have this baggage that they're carrying because they continue to keep adopting and acquiring information without the equal measures of action. So when we choose to take action in our own life, we make decisions. And when we make decisions, the very nature of a decision is not something we're moving towards. It's what we're cutting away from within our life. It's all of the information we've become present to. We make a decision, it's now the choice to let go of the things that we have learned or the scaffolding that we're now standing upon, that we're now going to push away because we're going to head in this particular direction, even though we're aware of or being told or taught these many different things. It's now our choice on how we culminate everything that we have learned. In order to take a particular pathway forward, we have to choose to let go. We have to choose to cut away. And for many people, there's a certain comfort that may come in getting together with a lot of others. But I would suggest that those people that don't choose to action or don't choose to create from that particular space, from that particular coming together, and that's why I would say probably in coming months and maybe coming years, if these movements continue in the way in which they are, they will gain a lesser following. And maybe some of those people have then chosen to go, well, I'm going to actually go and do something because I've turned up to these things so many times and nothing's changing. It's another person speaking about the oppression that we're in. It's another person that's educated me in a small part. But am I there for someone to lead me, or am I there for me to grasp something that can add to the path that I'm already on? And I'd say that there's a greater amount of dead weight that exists in the movements towards freedom than the ones that are opposing it. And this, it also comes back to what I would say the highest form of expression that exists. It exists all around us. It's ultimate and absolute organization. I mean, for many of us, and science is a great example of this. Well, we don't need to understand the world around us until we understand ourselves. Because once we start to understand ourselves, we'll find the confirmation of that in the dynamic structures of nature that exist around us. But for many of us, we're trying to interrupt that. And that may be happening, and maybe the agenda of certain groups to interrupt nature. But nature is the highest form of organization that there is, and we have that within us. If we can't learn to organize our own self, It is not possible to come together with other people to organize movement towards an outcome. It's just not possible, because every time that we are disorganized in ourselves, we are going to find that same level of disorganization with great intent when we start to come together with others. I think we've spoken about this sort of this image that, we're all pieces of the puzzle. But if we haven't defined the shape of our piece, we can't fit into the puzzle. We're all trying to be the same piece in that puzzle, and we're all trying to emulate each other, rather than defining by our own determination what we are, not who we are. The who we are, as I've said a number of times before, is what we are in comparison to others, how we model ourselves and how we look and present ourselves in many different ways. A who is in relation to the comparison of other who's, but the what is what stands alone, and it's only native to you. So these particular marches, I appreciate the intent that and what people are looking to evolve into, but I would say there's a great collective amount of fear that's there, and someone hoping that someone will lead them forward. And I'm not saying that's the case with every single one. I'm not saying that that's the case with maybe the people that are leading that. But what are we causing people to lead towards? If it's just about getting more people, I mean, it's just a modern day Facebook, ultimately, where we're looking at success by the amount of likes that we have or the amount of shares that we got, by determining that, well, there was more people here this time. I would rather a particular space where there's 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10 people that are aligned, and that alignment coming together and working towards a greater outcome is what's going to truly create change. That to me is the bringing together of those that are organized to then step into a greater space of organizing together. And in order to organize together, we have to let go. And in order to let go, we have to release certain things as opposition to what other people are doing. And look, I just feel like I go in so many different directions here, but opposition, it's very much, it's the thing that is driving so much activity by so many good people at the moment, because they want revenge. They want people to feel the pain that they're in because they can't seem to release it from within themselves. And until we embody that, we can't let go of it. I was reading something earlier today that someone sent me that, and I love these words, that we can't disown what we haven't owned. And until we accept our own frailties in the understanding that we're the supreme power, I mean, that is never going to change. We are the supreme power. We are the supreme power in every particular way. But if we ever lose that, we will then start to feel, when we're challenged by our frailties, our weakness, when we start to look at them, we don't have a reference point because we believe that that's what we are, rather than always understanding and knowing that I'm the supreme power, but I just don't yet understand how to utilize that, how to navigate that, how to embody that. But a part of embodying that is letting go of the frailties, and when they present to us, is being able to welcome them so we can move through them.
I want you to talk about how do we welcome the frailties.
So to me, that there's my experience and what I focus on is not telling people what certain things are. Like, let's say the life, your existence, your soul, or whatever it may be. It's about you learning as an individual, first of all, how to release. Now, when I say release, I mean that we don't dismiss it from our life or deny it from our life, or put it in a box that I'm never ever going to experience or want that in my life ever again. Releasing is about creating a new relationship. So to first welcome is about having a capacity to release. If we're not releasing each and every day, we are going to be less likely to welcome anything into our life. So to welcome can come first of all, when we recognize just in our own state of awareness that when we are feeling pain, is stop automatically reacting and going into that space that this is bad or this is this, and allowing all of our knowledge, which is just information from the past, other people's experiences that have worked for them, their observations. So when we stop going into making that thing bad, but we allow ourselves, and one of the most simple things to do is just to open your body up, just to, I think it's the word supinate, to actually just open up, put your shoulders back and allow yourself to bring more of this feeling to me. When I'm in deep pain or, states of anxiety, embrace it, actually engage yourself with it. Another way to do that, in just sitting in that particular space, just come into it. Don't try to change it, just become present to it. Another way to do this is when you start to experience it, write it down. Write down exactly what you're feeling, the depths, the darkness of that particular feeling, and become present to it. Because whilst we don't become present to it, it's going to continue to keep coming at us again and again and again. And we're going to be affected. We're going to be interrupted by it consistently. So to welcome something is to want to observe it, to want to experience it, to want to explore it. I think from my experience, and a great starting point is to write about it, is to get a pen and paper, because when you get a pen and paper, you have to become present to what it is that you're experiencing. For many of us, let alone admitting to the people around us, we don't even want to admit to ourselves those things that are challenging us. And these toxic thoughts, these toxic experiences that we're having, and the things that we're talking about to welcome, they are only coming to the surface in a recognition of our growth. When we choose to be able to create or move forward in any particular way, what comes to the surface and comes into our current awareness are these things that we're purging from our own body. Now, let's just say as they start to be pushed out and they start to go through our skin, we might have, sensory responses. And for some of us, that is to close down and to do the opposite of supinate. I think it's pronate, to cross our arms, to make ourselves smaller. And ultimately what we do is we suppress that thing and we push it back in. But it's to recognize a natural part of our own function is that when we start to grow, we start to purge out those things that are toxic. And it's our capacity to be able to move through that and welcome that allows us to move into what we're here to create. Otherwise, we'll find ourselves consistently in going to create, bringing up the things that are toxic in our life. And as they come up, we close them down and we go through this cycle of pain and relief and pain and relief and pain and relief. In order to welcome something is, as I was saying before, to stay in the conversation that little bit longer. So to sit in that space as it's coming up and it's naturally purging out of us, that we allow the functions of our own being, that we don't always need to be up. We don't always need to be, the great example of life that we would imagine it to be, that everyone wants to see us as. There's times in our own brilliance that we go through points of suffering, but it's how we go through those points of suffering. It's not the suffering itself, but it's our ability to be able to see that come up and out and through us and be part of our expression so that we can move into a state of our own authenticity and alignment with that. So there's a number of ways, and I wouldn't go more deeper than that, because I think at times when you provide information in these ways, it buys into that idea of there's this temporary fix. That we've fallen into that in life. We've got to fix something, which means that we've got a problem. And once we accept we've got a problem, the issue is that when we liberate that problem and we start to feel a level of joy and fulfillment from it, well, our next focus is to find the next problem. And we can go on this endless journey of finding problems. And the issue in our life when we start to find real freedom is if we don't have any more problems, we'll continue to create them, because it brings us this temporary, rush within us because we've liberated something, but we've got to realize we created the problem in the first place. So to be able to sit, to be able to continue to focus and operate in the direction that you are already heading when these challenges come up, is a determination of your ability to be able to maintain ease and momentum and movement in our own life.
So what you're offering here with the writing, and I know I've been doing it this week, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it, is it's different from meditation. Talk to me about meditation and why it may be a wonderful tool, but for actual releasing, if that's the right word, or accepting, it may fall. I don't want to use the word short, but it may not be the best use of your time.
Okay, so meditation is one of those words that, is thrown across so many different actions and activities. Meditation is the maintaining of presence, and it's the direction of your attention. And that can be found in cooking, that can be found in driving a car, that can be found, whilst you're in the shower. Meditation has been taken away and I would say mistaught, misrepresented in so many different ways. Often meditation creates this great space that people can go into, but it takes themselves out of the reality and the meditation that exists around them in everyday life. If we can't maintain that same level of ease, that same level of presence in each and every moment, what we do in these moments of silence when we separate ourselves from life is just showing the disintegration of what we truly are. We've got a safe space that we go to. But the ability to be able to not interrupt, to not use our knowledge because we think we know better. And look, we use our knowledge a lot of times, we think we know better for everyone else, and if they could just change, everything would be okay because then we wouldn't have to. But the very nature of, there are things that work without effort. So if we want to get present to ourselves, I would suggest to people that it's impossible to get a pen and start writing and think of and be present to other things. It's not possible to do that. But to sit in a space of silence, we will think and be disjointed in so many different ways, and eventually we can force ourselves to focus on something that we want to be focusing on and we believe to be true. But we've got to then take accountability. Is our life now representing what it is that we're seeing in those moments? Or is this just a place that we go to in order to feel good about ourselves for a period of time that provides an equal balance to the tragedy that we might be experiencing in our own life? The lack of ability to create what it is that we truly want to create. Do we keep going into these silent spaces to heal ourselves or to justify to ourselves that we are an ethereal being and we have this great inordinate and omnipotent power? Or are we actually demonstrating that in our own day-to-day life by being able to maintain our attention into the presence of our own true self? And to me, these things should not be a practice. They should be a process that we go through that do not determine or dictate our life. They are just processes that we go through in order to be able to maintain ourselves and our presence to what we are choosing to do in each and every day. Because when we become present to what we're doing each and every day, we'll very soon see if the things we are doing are things that we find joy in, are things that we enjoy in our life. Are we doing a job? Are we following a career because it's what brings us fulfillment? Or are we doing so because we're obligated to, because we must? And then are we doing these other practices in order to make ourselves feel good because we've been so deflated and defueled by the things that we continue to do that don't serve us? Meditation itself, look, it's a very, in its true form, is a very advanced practice. Meditation at times comes from a lot of practices where people in previous generations and eons before now were not distracted with the things that we have around us at this particular point in time. They were doing so for hours within a day. It was what they did. It wasn't something that they did in opposition to what they then did outside of meditation. Meditation can create a great sense of duality if it is not allowing ourselves to become more present in our day-to-day life. So it's a big topic to go into because there's so many different practices and there's so many different ways. But if we're using meditation to escape what we are doing in a day-to-day, we are not truly meditating or serving ourselves. Our ability to be able to release is what allows us to become present to what is.
Where to from here? I've got so many questions, but I can tell you want to continue with something there.
Yeah, I really feel it's we've got to begin at the starting point. And for many of us, we justify that we don't have time. We don't have time to do the certain things that we know that we should do. But ultimately, when we're still sitting in a place of the things that we should be doing to support ourselves, we're never going to do them. Until eventually, it's in moments of crisis and moments of great pain that we eventually start to do the things that are most serving of us. But here becomes the issue is that for most of us, when we make decisions where we're in deep states of despair, when we're in deep states of pain, or we might have some sort of terminal condition or illness where we now have to put ourselves first, we start doing things that bring us forward. But the issue is because we started from a place of pain, as soon as we start to relieve ourselves from that pain, we start to create a level of inertia to taking the actions that we have been taking because the pain is now subsiding. Our challenge as individuals is to get into a place of pure space where we now have true wealth. And to me, true wealth is our ability to maintain space. We provide true wealth to someone else when we can provide space for them to be themselves. And we've had experiences with others, all of us, that when we provide space for others, we bring out their wealth by them releasing and letting go because they are in a space that we have created. And through that can be observed. But the ability to be able to maintain space for ourselves is where our true wealth comes. For many of us, when we go through these moments of enlightenment or progress in our own life, and financially might be a good one because it's a measurable one, but it's definitely not the only. When we start to develop a level of wealth, one of the most challenging things for individuals is when they have wealth and they see people without it and the people around them suffering is they want to give it away. And ultimately what they're doing is what they've acquired, what they've come to value and the progress that they've gone through definitely does not enable those others. When someone comes to us when we've found progress within ourselves, they don't come to us because they want a handout. They want to feel owned, or they want to feel like that they need some sort of crutch. What ultimately people are coming for, which they may not be able to express, is they want what you have, but they want what you have as a demonstration, expression of that within themselves. So too often when we have created space, we end up giving it away for others. We end up taking responsibility for them. And ultimately, they don't progress. And quite often what can happen is when we step out of our own space in order to help others that haven't yet requested it, we eventually become the problem in their life. We eventually become the center of their blame. We eventually become the thing that they want to destroy. And ultimately, when we imprison people by what we give to them, the only way that relationship's going to end is in turmoil. Because for me to really find freedom now, I have to let go of this particular individual that I've allowed to possess me. Now, whether that's through finance, whether that's through advice that's freely given. It's very different to give advice to someone who is invested in that, whether that's through payment or some form of genuine exchange. Without genuine exchange, there becomes a burden, there becomes guilt that is received with that particular advice, especially if that advice is powerful. We must raise ourselves to that particular point where we take absolute responsibility for where we are. And when we take responsibility for where we are, we'll start asking questions and we'll want to understand how to move through it rather than just having a band-aid placed upon it. For some of us, we like that band-aid initially because it feels good. We just want to get out of that space. But when we've done that a number of times, we realize that's not the solution. So, getting back to even what we spoke of at the beginning, the solution, for our own life is always going to be about movement. And we can start to create that in our own self, but it's our capacity to be able to bring people who have also found themselves towards a collective space together only once we've found independence within each of our own selves.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say all that, because over the last year, I've asked many people that I've had on the podcast, it's like, how come people like you aren't in the political realm, or as these types of change leaders in those realms where you get to make decisions on for what's going on in the country, and yeah, it's a really interesting time, that's for sure, that we seem to, and I think it's being observed more now, and the awareness is rising or raising more, that people hopefully are seeing so-called leaders and their incapacity to lead. I mean, I without passing too much judgment, but I look at the people that talk in mainstream, whether it be politicians or health ministers or whoever it may be, and they don't look like they're empowered or embodied with knowledge and understanding how they work, so to speak. So I think it's a beautiful time, or a beautiful opportunity for a new movement.
Well, I mean, I think there's a predetermined space that has been created by the oppressor, let's say. And when someone comes in with a new idea and they want to get into that space, the only way in that limited playing field is to then get rid of those people that are in that space already. So there becomes a confrontation. And there's very little space that's created to understand what has been brought forward. But when certain individuals are holding power, there's not too many at the moment that have power within themselves. And I'm pretty sure all of us can see those people that currently assume offices of power do not have power within themselves. And they don't want to let go of their relationship to power, which is the office or the status or the space that they've created. But when an individual has power in themselves, what they're welcoming is anyone who can express that particular office or that particular platform greater than what they can. And that becomes a challenge that to now in creating a movement beyond that is, to turn your back on that particular current structure. Stop trying to fix the current structure. The current structure doesn't work, so why get in and try and fix it? And the reason why people get in and try and fix it, because they're challenged by the unfamiliarity of what it is to create something completely new. And yes, and you might sit in these conversations with people there's just a lot of work in it. There's so much that we need to put into it, but it's exactly what is required in order to go through those particular steps and processes to come to understand the respect that comes with what you're about to create, with the space that you're about to bring forward, so that when you do assume it, you don't give it away for free. And I don't believe there's any liberation that will come through government. I believe people may make different choices, but I believe liberation comes through governance, and that's personal governance. And once we can start to emulate that within our own self, we can then start to present effortlessly ways that other people can start to govern themselves. And I believe that that's part of an awakening that is occurring. We have this thing in society, where there's certain agendas that believe that we need to have equality, and equality seems to be brought down to the lowest common denominator, or the one that's downtrodden, or the one that is weakened in some way or disabled in some way. I mean, if we're truly looking to aspire, if we're truly looking to grow, why would we focus our attention on bringing ourselves down to the lowest common denominator? Why don't we spend our time and attention on bringing those lowest common denominators up to the greater example that already exists? Why is it that we feel comfortable giving money to someone who is down and out, rather than to someone who's already aspiring and in a greater place than what we are? Why don't we encourage that? And these particular points of, these false equalities that there that make people feel comfortable in their own disease that they have within themselves. I mean, we can either buy in and we can either fight against that, or we can just create a different reality. I mean, I'm not affected by what's going on. And whatever people perceive is going on in their own life and what they perceive is going to happen, because I don't live in that space. And I don't mean that in a place of ignorance, but I'm more greatly engaged in my own life. And by doing so, I have my own challenges. I don't have time to deal with other people's inadequacies. Because I can't do anything about that. I never will be able to do anything about that. I can only provide an example. And if those particular people want to continue down that path, all power to them. But whilst we continue to find ourselves in opposing the evils of others, we are only going to continue to elevate it and make it more significant. I can tell you right now, it's for everyone to stop paying attention to the government, to start to live and find their own power, for people to find their own truth. And I mean, when we're talking government here, we're talking such a low level of expression. I mean, it forms a very little part of my consideration in life. But it seems to be a common thing at the moment. Governance is about going into the true unknown, and that is what we are. There is nothing more unknown than what we are, because no one can stand next to us as we explore our own self. They can give us some directions. They can talk about their own experiences. They may be able to share some tools with us. But the greatest unknown exists within ourselves, because we're the only one that can explore it. No one else can do that. And it's to recognize that what it is, this great intelligence that exists within us, it doesn't have a timeline. It doesn't have compassion. It doesn't need to be kind. It doesn't need to convince you. It doesn't need to motivate you. It doesn't need to prod you along. It's timeless. It is what it is. You'll either get it or you won't. You'll either bring attention to it or you won't. Your soul is not there as some compassionate, mother-like figure that's waiting for you, that's going to uplift you along the way. You have to meet it. You have to be prepared to look at it. You have to be prepared to listen to it, which means letting go of all the things that you think that you know. And the greatest way I would say to welcome things in as well, Pete, is to take action in any direction and start moving forward. Because if the intention is to continue to keep moving, eventually you will find your path. It might be one that is, trailed with a whole range of pains and problems along the way. But if the intention is to continue to keep moving until I am complete, well, that decision is about being infinite. Because when I make a decision to create something and I don't stop until I'm complete, well, I manifest. For some of us, we do that much quicker than others. This is not about stupidity, or someone's level of academic intelligence, very low level of intelligence, but their awareness or any particular relationship that they have with wisdom. This is just the courage to continue to keep moving until I am complete. And what complete means to me is when I no longer require any attention to be placed upon it. If I believe that I'm complete in my life in regards to my relationship, well, it would mean that I would not be putting any attention or required to put any attention into it, because it would be complete. But it's the same with all things that exist in our life that are maintained. It's all the incomplete things that we don't understand and give time and space to allow ourselves to get to a point that we understand it. Not that someone else can tell us what it is. A life that will be found to be free moving forward is one without practitioners, one without healers, because we do that within our own self, and our focus and our single focus is only to be here to create. And that is where we truly expand ourselves, with those moments, those gifts that we give ourselves to truly create something.
I was just thinking about the points I was getting rubbed on today by the therapist. I got to work out how to do that myself.
Yeah,
but I'm gonna shy. I've just got to not shy away from when you know, when you see somebody and they get deeper than you can do it, or I shouldn't say you can do it, but you know, there'll be a point where you'll probably step back and go, okay, that's enough. Whereas the therapist will fucking get in there and get that. So that's the next part for me, I think.
I'll give you, well, what about this then? If what has that therapist actually done? They've centralized attention, or your attention, on one particular part of your body. And this might be the same as such things as plant medicines. It centralizes your attention upon something in a very significant way. It's a decision that you have made, and it may be coupled with something else that's assisting you in getting there. But it's giving you an example of where you can get to if you choose to or want to by yourself. You know, the challenge may be, you know, it's not to say that we never ever need anything or anyone else in our life to direct or guide us. The people around us can definitely speed us closer towards what it is that we may need or require, or what is in our highest good to focus on. Because there's certain practitioners that we go to, and we, after, you know, a body work or massage or whatever it may be, we go, well, that didn't really do anything. But then we can go to someone where we're like, geez, they really got in. They really got me there. And you become so present in that moment because you are the pain. You feel every particular moment of that within your body. But it's just highlighting what I could be exploring within my own self. And what we feel in that moment is our own ignorance. And it becomes exposed at that particular moment because I'm not aware of and present to my own self, because I'm caught up in all the other things that people want me to be. And this is, I suppose, what we were talking a little bit before about releasing. One of the most significant things about releasing is other people's energy that exists within us. I mean, and this is demonstrated when we start to create something, how the audience that we have within us, we start to think of, we start to consider a new way forward, and immediately people that are nowhere near us suddenly are right in our head.
Yeah, I mean, we've had chats this week, you know, because I was invited to take part in politics this year or last year, and it's really interesting because usually I can see the future pretty clearly, my future, so to speak. If I have an idea or a concept, I can, and it feels right to me. And I don't even like to use the word right, but let's just take the retreat for an example. When I found that, my wife and I found that parcel of land, I could see it, boom, straight there. There was no doubt that we would be opening a health retreat, or wellness retreat, or cooking retreat. It was done. The vision was locked in, and when we ran our first retreat, and the first guest arrived, I was like, I've already experienced this. I already know what's about to happen. It was so matter of fact. Say, okay, yeah. Perfect congruence, perfect alignment. For me, anyway, that's my perception of this. And same thing when we made the Magic Pill documentary. Like, I don't know how to make a documentary, but I knew when I made the decision that we would release something that would be pretty profound, or very profound, in my perception. And as soon as it was finished, after going back and forth 20 times with the editor and director, I was like, done. This is finished. Move on. Whatever happens now will happen. Whether one person watches it or a million people watch it, it's done. You know, and I removed the expectation from it. And with the political thing, I've been toying with this now for 6-9 months or however long it's been. I was like I just don't know whether I'm going to be in here for a week, a month, 6 months, 3 decades. I remember talking to you this week going, I'm not feeling it. You know, it feels out of alignment for me. And it was my second visit down to Canberra, and I'm sitting in Parliament House again, and I'm asking for solutions, for talking to different people. Well, what's the fucking solution here? And I still couldn't see it for the whole, so to speak. And I felt like I had this weight on my shoulders that I was here to fix Australia or be a part of that. And I was like, fuck, I can't see it yet. I can't see it yet. And what will be, what will come of if I keep walking towards something that I can't see? And I know that for anybody listening, that might sound like a cowardice thing, but I decided there and then that this is not the right time. And perhaps the different connections that have been formed from me putting my hand up or accepting the invitation in the last 6 months, maybe that's all that was required or that needed to manifest from me putting my hand up into that realm. And perhaps there was a ripple effect back there or somewhere along the journey that I haven't seen yet, which was absolutely perfect. And this is a really interesting space for me at the moment because it feels like I'm retreating. And for me to do that, that's actually me stepping into my darkness, so to speak, or into my fears. Because for the last 20, 30 years, I've been juggling so much and taking on more and more and more responsibility for other people. And now it feels incongruent to do that at the moment. And my ego is like, oh, you're just being a coward, you're fucking running away. And the other parts of me are like, no, this is good for you. This is really good for you to feel like this. There's work to be done and emotions to experience by seemingly departing from what everybody expects you to do. And I know I can I could keep walking that path because I'm tough and seasoned and thick-skinned, but it doesn't feel congruent anymore. And so this is a really beautiful junction point for me at the moment. And again, it's been a confronting week for me because I've had to sit in this desire of perhaps I can make a change out there in that system. But then I look at the system, I'm like, fuck, that system's just fucking broken as is. But perhaps to step away from the system and have these conversations with you and for others and do more work or have more space, as you said, and more time to explore myself and some of the darkness that's pouring in is going to be a beautiful journey. It already is a beautiful journey. So yeah, I don't know what you want to make of that, but because the people that are listening to this have probably listened to the podcast for the last couple of years. I think we're up to number 300 or something, and they probably, many, like the people in the health food store, have got the support out there for Pete Evans, as that figure. And some people might be feeling let down or pissed off or just celebrating this at the same time. And again, it's probably those two polar opposites and everything in between. And I guess I want to acknowledge everybody that feel free to feel whatever it is in this space.
I think it's a really big thing, that the whole realization of letting other people down and how much of a role that plays in our own life. I would say that people are great in these areas of looking to liberate or bring organization or bring, a sense of integrity to a system that doesn't have it. There's so much hope that exists in that area. And one of the things that I would say great leaders possess, and maybe seen from an outer source or from a distance to be inspirational and brilliant and great, are also seen as probably some of the most difficult people to deal with by those closest to them, because it requires, when we embody true leadership, to have to do and say things in a very deliberate, in a very non-explanatory way to make other people feel comfortable, but in order to act upon things that are true to them. to make decisions that are inconvenient, to make decisions that are uncomfortable to others, so they can bring up the shit that exists in their life, so that they can then start to focus upon that and start to liberate themselves if they choose. And for some of us to be able to confront our own thoughts of cowardice or stepping away or stepping back or letting down others requires us to do so that other people can have the opportunity to look at that themselves. And this is a little bit of what we were talking about before, is that we all want to play this happy game. But the real truth exists within us when we are able to share those things that are inconvenient, those things that are dark and hidden, so that we can bring light to them, so that we can move through them. And I would say that is for people that are in great places of power. And I look at, people that, even those that run significant corporations, and I've worked with some before, and there's this sort of colloquial idea that it's not a spiritual space to be the head of some international conglomerate. But there may be people that are evil in that space, and then there may be people that are not. And same within politics, same within life, same within the health industry. But what's important is to recognize when people take true responsibility to create something, when they take responsibility to work with great levels of power, they have to come to resolve that within their own selves. And there is, as I said earlier, the thing that is undeniable within all of us is that we are the supreme power. We've fallen into this trap and this idea that there's this creator or this God, there's this God. They're not as equal to us. God is in co-creation with us. It only exists because of us, whatever we perceive it to be. So until we see ourselves on equal footing, we will never allow ourselves to learn. We will continue to acquiesce and believe that there is something more powerful than us, something that has become this idea of buying into society and being able to serve this unseen expectation from others that exist around us, because we're not recognizing our own ability to create. Because if we truly did, we wouldn't care. We wouldn't be infecting ourselves with the expectations of others. We wouldn't be taking on other people's weaknesses or inability to express themselves. We would most demonstrate our capacity to be that God ourselves. And it's interesting that when you bring up the word like a God, that people, wars are fought over it. Wars have been created upon it. And I'd say they've been predicated on it because it's been this great level of control to cause people to believe in something bigger than themselves, so they never actually come to expect or explore how significant they are. And a true part of my understanding is the greatest fear that we all have is the acceptance of our own significance. To be able to say out loud and speak of our brilliance is far harder than to talk of our problems, our tragedies, our things that are seen to not be nice or good or elevating in any way. It's our brilliance and our capacity to speak of our brilliance, and us giving ourselves the attention to explore that is one of the most courageous things that we can do. Because we know that when we step outside of that societal expectation, we are going to be judged. But it's our capacity to be able to be judged and be able to continue to keep moving forward, which determines our ability to lead. And that leadership is only a fleeting thing because it gives other people the opportunity to step up and move beyond that example we've created. So brilliance, to me, significance. And that's what I work with people when we get through and they want to work through the muck, and we've got to liberate the physical before we can become present to the significance of the energetic. And the energetic is our wisdom. It's until we liberate our physical being, until we start to recorrect and reorganize it in a place of expression of that intelligence that is within us, we will not provide attention to it. We'll have fleeting moments. We'll buy into ancient philosophies. We'll buy into ideals that other people have created that are bigger than us because we haven't taken the time to understand how significant we are. We'll continue to keep reading books, and we'll continue to keep buying into other people's interpretation of what we're not prepared to look at. But we'll sit there reading through 400 or 500 pages of someone else's explorations rather than learning how to do that in our own self. And to me, what you're suggesting, and I would say I see this a lot with people that have great leaders, how much they're challenged by this concept of stepping away because they've never done it, or stepping back, or stepping into themselves because they've been so driven in life by doing things for other people for such a long period of time. That is their unfamiliar. Whereas for most people, it's unfamiliar to step into leadership, to step into service, to step into creating something that other people will benefit from. And, there's transitions we always go through, but it's the ability to be able to listen to that silent soul within us, to give it space, to have a place where you meet that, not occasionally, but consistently and regularly, like you would the one that you love, the people that you share your bed with. And we need to be putting ourselves into that same platform. And until we do, we'll continue to keep complaining about the structures that exist around us and why they don't serve us, because we're not giving ourselves attention. We're not seeing our own brilliance. And we'll continue to keep buying into concepts of the past that seem to be bigger than us, that never are.
Well said. It's been interesting because over the years, one of the questions, being a celebrity chef, and what I found really fascinating was journalists, they have these two questions that seem to keep popping up. Who would you invite for dinner, dead or alive, if you could cook for somebody? And the other one was, who is your inspiration? Or where did you get your inspiration from? And I remember once I wrote down an answer it was about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And the journalist says, who inspires you? I just wrote down myself, me. And I knew when I was writing it, it felt perfect. I was like, let's see how they deal with this. Let's see how they deal with this truth. And because it was my truth, it is my truth. Nobody inspires me more than myself. There are people out there that are inspirational, but nobody has inspired me more than myself each and every day, because nobody's had to make the decisions that I've made. Nobody gets to experience what I get to experience each day, and come back for more and more and more and more, and work out how to navigate this earth suit. And I sort of sat back and I was waiting for the thing to come out. And then it was plastered out, Pete Evans, big head, blah, blah, blah. I was like, brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Because I stood up for myself. And at the back of my mind, I was like, okay, well, I'll get shot down, especially in this country, with the tall poppies and the victim mentality. I was like, that's okay. I can deal with that because I'm sharing a truth. And the truth is, my truth is powerful. And perhaps it will allow other people to voice their own brilliance or be inspired by their own selves, and that it's okay to love yourself in that way and to share that in a way, just like it's equally as powerful to share your vulnerabilities when they pop up, like I'm doing here with you and the listeners and viewers today. So I thank you for allowing me the space, brother, and
Pleasure.
for everybody that's listening and viewing to also allow me to share today. And is there anything you'd like to finish with, Jace?
I was just listening to what you're saying, and it's I think it's something that's so very important for people that are looking to lead and create in their own lives, is to recognize that the more determined or self-determined that you become, the greater the opposition that will occur. And it's that, the willingness to expose ourselves is what's going to always bring judgment. The greater we expose ourselves, the more judgment we will receive. And to be able to take that as a badge of honor, and like we're talking about before, to sit in that space, because the more impact that we have in the decisions that we make, it allows us to become and reconcile and calibrate to the type of influence that we have. And once we understand that, we can start to value what we are in a greater way, whether that is in support or opposition of what we're doing. But I think it is so very important for people to start to explore their brilliance, even if it's in their own silence, before they can start to express it. But I truly believe that, to lead we must realize that what we're doing is liberating, and the first part of liberating is releasing all of those things that are binding us, that are holding us back. So when we do intend to do something new or different, expect people to become opposing of it. And if they're not, you can suggest to yourself that there's not much leadership in what it is that I'm doing.
I will finish by saying the three people that I would say when they asked me the question about who I want to have dinner with, alive or dead, was always the same. It was my wife and my two kids. I remember publicists going, "Oh, that's not really what we're after." I go, "Yeah, but it's the truth."
Yeah, we don't want the truth.
It's the truth. But exciting times, my friend. Thank you once again for gracing us with your perception and your
Thanks very
wisdom.
much. It's an absolute pleasure, Pete, and I honoured to share that space with you, and thank you very much.
Love you, mate. Till we meet again.
See you, mate.
See you, buddy.